Massachusetts Representative Andy Vargas represents the 3rd District in Essex in the state legislature. He is also current chair of the Massachusetts Black and Latino Legislative Caucus. Welcome, Chairman. Really appreciate your time.
Great to be with you, Charles.
Excellent, excellent. So I know a lot of legislatures right now are talking about the federal government shutdown in Washington, D.C. People typically think, well, that's confined to the federal government, but of course, states are also beginning to feel the impact, the crunches of that event of right now that shutdown that's happening in D.C. So talk about ways in which that's impacting Massachusetts. I know you're focused right now on SNAP benefits.
Absolutely. So one of the big things that we're trying to get a handle of is what we can do locally to help mitigate the impact. In my district, there's about 14,000 people that are impacted if SNAP doesn't go out in November. That's about half the size of Fenway Park, just to put into context in terms of the number of people, and that's just one legislative district. And if the state were to try to pick up the month of November for SNAP in Massachusetts, that would be $240 million. To put that into context, the cost of providing universal school meals, which is a bill that I helped get done, is $200 million annually. This is big time financial cost, but more importantly, big time human cost. There are thousands of people in my district, and so many across the Commonwealth that are going to go without their SNAP benefits really because of an intentional policy decision at the federal level. There are safeguards in place where the Trump administration could still fund SNAP despite the federal government being closed, and they're choosing not to. So we at the state level are left with sort of picking up the pieces and trying to do what we can, both from a policy level, but also from organizing at the local level to try to mitigate the impact.
And mitigating the impact with SNAP benefits. Other major programs also impacted by that?
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about the federal funding cuts that are coming to states. In Massachusetts, it's projected around 4 billion in cuts across different programs. To put that into perspective, we have about 8 billion in our stabilization as a state. So, and again, you really only want to tap into stabilization for one-time costs. And if you're already talking about 4 billion in cuts, that's not really sustainable for the Commonwealth to pick up. So. And that doesn't really take into account either the cuts to Medicaid that we're expecting in terms of people dropping off of Medicaid who are duly eligible but aren't going to be able to jump through all the new hoops that they've been given to stay on Medicaid. And so it's a really tough fiscal time right now, but states are grappling with it, and we're doing the best that we can here in the Commonwealth to take care of our people.
So what are the issues that you're currently focused on at the moment, Representative? Outside of course, the government shutdown, trying to mitigate the impacts of that, responding to that, how that's going to also affect your budget there in Massachusetts. Of course, that's top priority at the moment, of course. But what are those other major issues that you're focused on as Representative Vargas for your district?
Yeah, so aside from mitigating the immediate impacts and the crisis that we're in from the federal government, the sort of overarching theme of what I prioritize and work on are cost of living and then maximizing the full potential of every person in my district and in the Commonwealth. Under cost of living, we can think about the highest cost of living in Massachusetts. The highest sort of variable to cost of living in Massachusetts is housing. We have incredible demand and we don't have the supply necessary to balance that supply demand scale. And so housing costs here are astronomical. We have so many renters and even homeowners that are paying disproportionate shares of their income towards rent or mortgage payments. And we've got to get that down. And so we've been working on legislation to build on some of the efforts that we've already passed relative to producing more housing and getting that balance of supply demand down.
Mm. And so the housing, obviously a big topic for you, trying to reduce costs there. But what are other issues? I mean, housing the main issue for your constituents? I mean, what's your focus on affordable housing? Are there some other issues? I'm assuming you sit on the Joint Committee for Community Development and Small Businesses. So Are those other issues or the issues you're focused on align with which your constituents are coming to you about?
Yeah, absolutely. So housing definitely is the number one thing that we hear about from my constituents, which is also why it's our top priority. When it comes to the work of the Joint Committee on Community Development and Small Business, there's a couple of different things we're looking at. One is downtown vitality. We know that during the pandemic, downtowns really took a hit and haven't really come back. When we think about commercial properties, when we think about foot traffic and people coming back to work. And downtowns play such a vital role in so many of our communities that we want to make sure that we're supporting our downtowns and supporting the businesses that are down there and creating sort of the infrastructure and the technical assistance necessary for our downtowns to be able to thrive in this post-pandemic economy. And so that's definitely a big priority for us. We have a downtown in my district that ebbs and flows, has, sort of peak hours where there's a decent amount of people, and then there's kind of dormant hours, and there's some thriving storefronts, and there's some vacant storefronts. And so we're looking at bid legislation, trying to reform, the bids, the business improvement districts that exist as one way to potentially do that. And on the small business end of things, we're really looking at how can we protect small businesses and also bolster them and make them more competitive in the digital economy. And so that can look like a lot of different things. One of the areas that we're looking at is, for example, you have these big data companies and even companies like Amazon that harvest the data that small businesses provide them and then turn around and create their own products that compete with the small business data that has been provided. So a good example of that is you might have a mom and pop shop that's selling a great, fruit basket or some like wooden basket or something that's selling really well on Amazon. And then all of a sudden, Amazon's like, oh, we can make an Amazon basic fruit basket. And now I'm going to be marketing to those same customers that the small business was successfully capturing via our platform. And so we're thinking about different ways to make sure there's a level playing field in the marketplace for everyone to compete, and that online retailers are abiding by the same rules that brick and mortar retailers are doing every single day.
How do you ensure that socioeconomically distressed communities in a city like Boston, a high growth city like Boston, are also, uh, are also able to benefit from, as you were saying, the growth, the vitality of downtown centers? How do you make sure that happens? You'll have communities of struggle. They'll often talk about how, those that downtown or that central city growth will impact them in rather negative ways as they talk about gentrification. So how do you reduce those impacts?
Yeah, so I think there's two different things here. One is sort of Boston's downtown, which is kind of in its own category, right? And then
Mhm.
there are the downtowns that exist in small to mid-sized cities across the state. And so in my district, we do have a downtown that's sort of one main strip that has,
Mhm.
restaurants and bars and some offices, lawyers, engineers, et cetera. And
Got it.
in every one of the gateway cities across the state, there is at least one of those streets that serves as the downtown. And so
Mhm.
for a lot of these communities, this is sort of the economic center of the community and the place where community is built. For Boston, it's a little bit trickier, right? Because you have sort of financial district, you have sort of restaurant scene, you have different sort of pockets of condensed activity. But I think the through line is, transportation and housing that allow people to access those same goods and services and to participate in that economy are a way to make sure that as we support our downtowns, that we're lifting all boats at the same time.
Mhm. You were selected as Maryland excuse me, Massachusetts, getting my M's confused, Massachusetts Black and Latino Legislative Caucus Chair earlier this year. So, what are the top issues for the caucus right now?
Yeah, so it was an honor to be chosen by my colleagues to be chair of the Massachusetts Black and Latino Caucus. We're rather unique in that we're the only state legislative caucus that is joint together, both Black and Latino, which has created a membership of 26 members
Mm,
in the House and the Senate, which is a historic number of members. It was an organization that started with 3 members at one point, and now
mhm,
we're at 26. And so it really is. a huge privilege to be able to do that. One of the areas that's a big priority right now is around responding to the immigration related challenges that we're seeing in all our districts, and ICE coming into our districts and picking up people seemingly just by identifying their race, and pulling them over or asking them questions. And so we're thinking through ways of which we can ensure that there's due process, and that we protect our immigrant communities from having their constitutional rights violated. And so one of the big things that we worked on already this session was the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund, which ensures that immigrants have access to counsel and can ensure that their due process rights aren't being violated here in the Commonwealth. And so we continue to look at potential legislation or actions that we can take as a state to try to mitigate these effects. Again, under the guise that the vast majority of immigrants that are being detained by ICE are not, criminals. They're hardworking people that came here to look for a living and to be able to provide for their families, and sometimes fled violence in their home countries. And that's really the premise of how this whole country was started, right? People fleeing violence, looking for opportunity, fleeing persecution. And there was an Ellis Island, at some point where people were able to come and get processed. And I guarantee you, if there was a welcoming Ellis Island, that it would be flooded today, and people would go through the same routes. And so I think it's important for people to understand sort of the long arc of American history, and remember the immense value that immigrants provide our community. This is not charity, right? Welcoming immigrants into our country and our state is not charity. It's strategic advantage. We're the beacon of the world. And in Massachusetts, I feel like we're the beacon of the country. And I know we talk high and mighty about having the first public school system and healthcare and so on and so forth. Um, but really, our secret sauce is that the best brains in the world want to come here. That immigrants want to come here. They want to create jobs. They want to create small businesses. The rate of new small businesses is disproportionately immigrant owned. And so when we talk about protecting and supporting immigrant communities, it's not a charity concept. It's a strategic advantage concept.
Mm. Right now, Massachusetts has a Democratic Party trifecta, correct? In terms of, legislature, governor's house, and the judiciary as well. So the legislature controlled by Democrats, obviously, and while that side of the partisan fence is typically aligned with Black and Latino interests, do you still find it challenging, right, to prioritize Black and Latino interests before the legislature?
Well, I mean, I think when you look at, again, the long arc of history, it's always been challenging to get a
Right.
system that wasn't set up for particular types of people to respond to the needs of disproportionately marginalized communities. What I will say is that we're blessed in that we don't have a challenge in articulating the values or the needs or the reasoning behind our policy. When we meet with the governor, when we meet with the speaker, when we meet with the Senate president. We're not talking, to try to convince them about how, there's systemic inequality and that there inherently is racism baked into so many of our systems that
Mhm.
are in place. There's sort of a baseline understanding of that, which makes it really great to have fruitful conversations with them all. The greater challenge is dealing with the politics that every other state deals with, right? Is that how do you create a wide enough coalition and a tent that understands that what's good for one particular community is actually good for everybody. And so I think that coalition building is the part that sometimes can be most challenging, but also is most rewarding when you bring along unusual suspects on an issue to advance a cause.
Yeah, and also, what is it like? Very few, I mean, in comparison to the Democrats there on Beacon Hill, very few Republicans, and
We do
so
have one in the caucus. Yep.
right. Well, okay. Okay. There
Yeah.
you go. And so, how do you how do you balance that, with that one particular member in the caucus, but how do you go across the partisan aisle and, try to spark relationships? Because at some point you're going to have to on particular issues or legislative matters. How do you, on some level, navigate those relationships? What's
Yeah,
that like?
we have the supermajority in both chambers, and so technically, from a sort of math perspective,
Right.
you could pass everything you want along partisan lines. If you look at how we pass things, however, in Massachusetts, that's usually there's very few roll calls that are strictly partisan, with
Okay.
there's sort of an intent to try to build the broadest coalition as possible. With Rep. Vaughn, who's a wonderful member of our caucus, the Black and Latino caucus, I found that it actually strengthens our caucus to have a Republican member because we're able to sort of consult with him and say, how would you react to this, right? What do you think about this policy? If this is a concern to you, how would, we offset that concern with some other issue that's important to you? And it really allows us to really build a broader tent that not only is good for getting Republicans to support a bill, but also getting conservative Democrats to jump on board
Mhm.
with a bill, especially if they see, oh, there's a Republican that supports that. Okay, I can't be spotted by a Republican. I'm a Democrat. I gotta support this issue where the majority of Democrats are on as well. And so it's kind of a benefit. I see it more of as a benefit for us in the caucus. And don't forget, Massachusetts has elected Republican governors many times. We had Republican Governor Charlie Baker, who at one point was the most popular governor in America. And so our focus is on just getting things done, and whoever wants to be a part of the coalition to do that, they're welcome.
Mm. And also, how do you balance different interests that are prioritized by or celebrated by different caucus members? Can that sometimes get challenging in and of itself?
Absolutely. I mean, we have 26 members with different geographies, different demographic makeups in their districts. And so it can get challenging to really coalesce around, one specific issue. What we do every session is we come up with our top 10 priorities, and people can see that on our website. We list our top 10 priorities and we vote on them as a collective. And through those priorities, we signal to leadership, to the governor, and the community that these are all issues that affect all of our districts, or they're so important that even if they might not have, the same impact in my district as someone else's district, I know that what's happening, across the state there is going to impact my residents in my district as well. And so it's about having, conversations. It's about trying to break down issues so people understand how they tangibly affect them and their residents. And that's allowed us to develop a cohesive agenda around 10 priorities each session.
Now you have that agenda that's highlighted by the caucus. Does that align with the interests or the concerns of your district? Is there a balancing act there?
Yo, absolutely, right? Like my district is not majority people of color, for example. But that doesn't mean that the issues that we champion are, strictly just for people of color to benefit, right?
Mm.
So like one of the issues that we decided to champion this session was around data privacy, right? Like that's not necessarily a black or brown issue. Data privacy and internet affordability, that issue affects everybody. And we felt that it disproportionately affects Black and Brown communities because there's low digital literacy rates, lower access to internet. And again, that's an issue that disproportionately affects Black and Brown communities, but it affects everybody. And doesn't matter your race or your background.
Mm. We've been talking with Massachusetts Black and Latino Legislative Caucus Chair, Representative Andy Vargas. Thanks again, Representative, for your time. That's it for this segment. I'm Charles Ellison, your executive producer and host. A round of gratitude to our partners, the Council of State Governments, and also the Civic Literacy and Media Influence Institute at Learn for Life. And we really appreciate their support as always. Diane Ellison is executive producer. Raven Robinson is senior producer. Until then, find this episode and more while subscribing at thebnote.com. And thanks for watching as always.